Test, 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 test.
Test. So, good afternoon, everyone. We are not getting started just yet. We are waiting on our panelists. One is stuck in some traffic, and the other one stepped out for a moment. So, if you give us a couple more minutes, I'll come back and let you know exactly where we are. For those that are really cold and may want to partake in the smart cities, it is not full. So, if you want to make your way over there, but just give me a couple of minutes while we wrangle in our panelists. All right. All right. Thank you. Yeah, the other room is not cold. Oh, you got mittens. Yeah, the other room is not cold. Yes, the other room is much warmer than this room. Yeah, I mean this place is full. Like,
housekeeping, everyone, before we get started. Quick housekeeping. There were some keys left in the vehicle. The tag number is 7FJK87. 7FJK87. So good afternoon, everyone. We are going to go ahead and get started with our public safety panel. My name is Meredith Hurston. I'm with the McGovey Group, and the two gentlemen that are joining me today is Sergeant Brendan Gill with the Prince George's County Police Department. He is the committee chair for the Data and Analytics Human Trafficking Task Force for PG County. Did I get that right? And I also have Mr. Bernard Wright, who is the CEO of Pervista, which is an AI gun detection company. So thank you, gentlemen, for joining me today. My pleasure. So what we're going to be talking about today is how AI can be used in fire and police departments as well as medical services, how it can help with safeguarding lives and the infrastructure that is needed to use artificial intelligence in the public safety capacity. We're going to discuss some opportunities as well as challenges that are specific to public safety and the use of AI and how it can be used to prevent crime, enhance emergency responses, protect the environment, and also promote social justice. So that is our goal today. And I would like to have you both do an introduction about what you do and how you are using AI technology.
All right, so I'm Bernard Wright, and I've been in technology now for several decades. I used to be the CIO for Prince George's County. I was also the CIO for WSSC Water. And in both capacities, we did use what was considered to be the precursor to AI. So now we have branched off and we created a platform that leverages AI to analyze video streams from surveillance cameras in real time to detect firearms. And when we detect a firearm, we notify public safety authorities with the goal of really cutting down on the number of active shooter events in schools, hospitals, and other public places. And the reason we developed this technology is because there was a high-profile incident in May of 2023 right here in Prince George's County where 3 teenagers ran onto a school bus and tried to shoot another teen. Thankfully, that gun jammed, but because of that, we developed the technology and hope to cut down on similar incidents happening again in the future.
Can y'all hear me okay? Perfect. That's awesome. My introduction is not as prestigious. I am Brendan Gill, so I'm a criminal justice data scientist. I am assigned to the Office of Homeland Security for Prince George's County Police. I oversee our special projects section. And the first thing that I do want to say very kind of overtly is we don't use AI in the traditional sense where a lot of the media focuses on creating things and using artificial intelligence to dig into police reports and coming up with conclusions. That's not something that the police department does. So there's a bit of a misconception there, I think, that I did want to kind of dispel. However, knowing the current status of artificial intelligence, both generative and embedded within software, those programs, the police department very clearly has an interest in using and leveraging these types of technologies for various applications, some of them administrative in nature, some of them to promote, like we were saying, within the sphere of public safety, emergency response, disaster management. So that's kind of where we're at. That's kind of what we're doing, is evaluating how these technologies best fit within our current infrastructure, as well as to perform education and to ensure that our data, because artificial intelligence and data go hand in hand, are safe and secure from the community level and from the administrative level.
So what is safe, or what is something that the community should know about the standards that you are governed by or that you adhere to? I know we kind of talked about it as a precursor for this meeting.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm pretty sure everybody's familiar with HIPAA and HIPAA regulations when it comes to healthcare things. And law enforcement is no different. There are obviously not HIPAA regulations, but there are CJIS regulations that do govern what we do with our data, who has access to our data, what systems connect to it, how it's stored, how it's transmitted, how it's analyzed. So that's the first bit, is ensuring that any system that we move forward with or deploy or even evaluate for implementation, either administratively or within the sphere of criminal justice data itself, such as victim information, judicial process, is safe and secure and not, for sale or even for public inspection in the largest sense. Obviously, if someone needs a copy of an incident or if there's a legal request, by law we follow that. But we don't sell information. We don't connect it to sources that are unsecure. We take an extreme amount of safeguards to ensure that what is at rest is at rest.
Thank you. And Mr. Wright, can you talk about how Per Vista applies? Like, do you abide by the CJIS guidelines as well, or what sorts of regulations do you adhere to when deploying your technology out into the world?
Sure. So like Brendan, can you hear me? Okay. Yep, so like Brendan, we are very aware of certain standards like HIPAA and FERPA because we do work with schools and hospital systems. And our platform does not do facial recognition. We're looking for guns. And in talking to law enforcement, I would equate it to when body-worn cameras are triggered. Body-worn cameras are typically triggered when there is an incident. So at that point, there's an assumption that a crime is occurring. That's the same way our platform works. So we're only kicking in if someone were to walk into this gym with a gun. At that point, we are recording, we're sending clips, but at the same time, it's not going to the public, it's going to law enforcement. So we do make sure that we are we're not saving anything that's personally identifiable, we're not saving anyone's face, we're not saving anyone's name, but we are aiding law enforcement in determining whether or not a crime is occurring.
Okay, thank you. So far, do we have any questions from the audience? Anybody have any burning questions that they'd like to ask? Okay, we have a microphone coming to you.
My quick question, I don't know if it's possible you could share that. I have kids in middle school and high school, and when you talked about the kids that went into the school, 3 kids that wanted to shoot someone. So what have you installed? Have you installed like cameras or scanners on all school buses, or is this something you're thinking of doing in the future?
So our technology works with existing cameras. So we're not asking, as long as the camera can connect to the internet, we can work with any camera. So if there is a camera that's on the school bus that's connected to the internet, we just take what's called an RTSP stream, and it runs through our platform. It's in the cloud, and we can run the alerts against any number of cameras. So that's the way the technology works. We can certainly install new cameras, but we work with an existing investment as well.
Any other questions right now? Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Gordon McLean. I'm the ERP director for PG County. So if you were running a camera and you detect a knife or a gun or something of that nature, and you identify that, what's the alert system to stop it or to start locking down things so that nobody is hopefully injured?
Appreciate that question. So the alerts come 3 different ways. So we do have a video management system that we built. So the alerts will come in the platform itself, but it also comes via an email message, and it also comes via a text message as well. So very similar to the way that you might get alerts from Ring or ADT. So the biggest difference is that Ring and ADT do object detection against people, vehicles, animals. Our object detection is against weapons. So it functions much the same way that ADT does.
So I have a question for Sergeant Gill, and this is around a lot of the fear and misconception that people have and the general public has about how the police department and public safety is being, or AI is being used to assist with public safety and with police work. Can you talk a little bit about how, what tools are currently being used? I know that you are a data scientist. Can you talk about some of the ways that you are currently using AI technology to help with your work?
There are, Microphone, good? Okay. Whew. These things freak me out because it's so close to my face. So, a question that I actually have in response to that. Who within the audience has had some concerns when anytime anybody says public safety or fire, EMS, or police and artificial intelligence in the same sentence? Who has had concerns and questions? Yeah, I mean, that's fair. A lot of people have very significant, very serious concerns that are all 100% valid. And we share them with you. I'll be the first one to say, when anyone talks about law enforcement data and connecting it into, or fire data and connecting it into whatever that other word is, it gives me heartburn. And I do this for a living. I'll preface it with this. If you were able to, not obviously because you heard all morning long about ensuring that the human element is always still there. If you had the ability to use an artificial augmented tool to make your job more efficient so that you could redirect energy and resources into non-computery things, would you? Right? I mean, I think the vast majority of us would. Within the scope of answering your question, we have had artificial intelligence or augmented intelligence tools for years. They're all embedded within various softwares. More than likely, if anybody's ever used Microsoft Word in the last 10 years, you've interacted with one, right? That's enterprise-level augmented intelligence solutions. And those solutions do everything from check your grammar to ensuring you can put a formula into an Excel spreadsheet so that it actually calculates things appropriately. You don't really notice, right, that it's artificial intelligence until we started using the phrase AI, and then we started seeing some AI and robots that were policing streets and doing some really weird, ridiculous things that it makes great news, not news, great media stories in movies, but that's not what we're doing here. We're talking about implementing solutions to allow MPI and FOIA processes to be more efficient, to be quicker, to allow grants and grant tracking to be effective, to ensure that monetary disbursements of tax dollars are appropriately tracked and categorized, to ensure that when people are asking for recordings of interviews, whether that be administrative interviews from officers that are suspended and under investigation, that they're transcribed appropriately. No different than if someone had gone into a courtroom and gave courtroom testimony. A human is sitting there typing those responses out, a stenographer. But what if we were to take interviews and we had a solution that we could transcribe them automatically, instantaneously, and use that for judicial process, use that for internal reviews, and then learn where failure points were, both from an organizational perspective as well as from a criminological perspective or from a fighting crime perspective. What are some of the common trends, some of the common themes? What are we seeing? It takes an incredible amount of man hours for a human to type word for word to transcribe something. A really good example would be me saying not media and then me saying the word media twice in a sentence. A human would have to sit there and listen to it 2-3 times to actually get that down. A transcription service would almost be in real time. So those are the applications that, one, we're looking at exploring. Two, are not generative AI. They are within solutions that are enterprise level and that can help us be more efficient, especially because our workforce is dwindling. Right? We have less officers on the street patrolling a very diverse community, which we absolutely love doing. We're fighting resources, just like a lot of you and your agencies are also struggling with resources. We are doing the same. So if we can take a tool that can help us be more efficient while instilling the unbelievable need, which will never go away, of ensuring a human reviews any work product done, I think that's a conversation that we're all unbelievably willing to have and need to have.
That's really helpful.
Yeah, so all of the things that Brendan talked about are great ways that AI can certainly support public safety, but I also want to emphasize that there are all kinds of different types of AI as well. So what he talks about is one type of AI. What we use is computer vision and machine learning. But then everyone really got on board once ChatGPT came out with the large language models and generative AI, which is really based on historical context and making an assumption based on that information about what it thinks is correct. Now, where it gets to be a little dangerous is with predictive AI. So predictive AI is going to put something out there that doesn't exist. So it's going to take information and say, okay, here's what you can do. And if people are making decisions and moving forward based on something that has never occurred, you don't know what the outcome is going to be. So an example of that would be with the military. So with the military, of course, we're looking at autonomous drones, drones that are just lifting off based on a scenario and saying, okay, we think this is going to occur, and moving on its own without human interaction. That's dangerous because no one is really governing it. Where generative AI, it's giving the insights to people like Brendan and saying, okay, here's what we think is correct. Could you verify that? And what I would encourage people to do is to advocate heavily for public sector being involved in AI. So you really want the police department to be involved as opposed to private entities like Google and others owning data. Because once they own the data, there's no telling what they're doing with it. Just came out recently that Google admitted that they are monitoring phone calls, as you knew already. So is Apple. They own that data. But if you have public sector governing and saying how this information could be used, then you have a say in what's happening. So I would strongly encourage people to advocate for the public sector being involved in the governance of AI.
That is a great point. We have a couple of questions from the audience.
You mentioned a stenographer, and it made me think about, as we train up our next workforce, what are some jobs you foresee that we need to tell them that they should consider?
So the biggest, I'm sorry, Brendan.
No, go ahead. No, by all means.
So the biggest thing is, people are worried about AI replacing jobs. We're a long way away from that happening. Jobs will change. One of the jobs that's going to be very necessary is interacting with AI, an analyst. So right now, you have prompt engineers that are, working with ChatGPT to say, okay, could you do this thing? Those jobs aren't going anywhere anytime soon. It's a new field that's being created. In addition to that, technology really cuts across every industry. So there's going to be jobs for people that are working in healthcare to say, okay, these are new things that you can come up with in terms of determining health disparities or things that can improve social determinants of health. Same thing with the legal field. I mean, before I left the office today, I was looking at how it's impacting the legal field. And certainly, there are going to be elements in each one of those where there can be an AI prompt engineer that can really come up with new ways to move that field forward. So business analysts that are focused on AI is going to be a new field that's emerging, and certainly one that I would encourage people to take a look at.
I think I would agree. I think the analytics piece is never going to go away. I think that's going to be unbelievably important. But we also should remember that this current development of artificial intelligence, really more augmented intelligence, whether it's a large language model or a generative pre-trained transformer, all of these technologies are new. So making sure that we support the education to not only understand how they work at a fundamental level, but also how to review what they actually do is going to be the next phase of this evolution. For a law enforcement community, that could either be investigatory centric, such as how would these types of tools be used to help, and how could these tools, if they are used to do harm, how do we identify them and then take action to ensure that there are no legal violations. Another, back to the stenographer, you still have to review it. So even though a human may not be typing a recorded interview, someone still has to ensure that the interview isn't full of hallucinations, or the interview isn't full of made up words, that it is accurate, that it does actually represent what was said in that transcription, especially if that's going to go forward for judicial process like evidence. Right, you still need a human to review that. So research, verification, understanding of tool limitations, those are all, really the next phase within public safety, within criminal justice. I would say the next jobs.
Yeah, and I wanted to double down on what Brendan said in the beginning about data. So AI is useless without data.
Yeah.
So those jobs are always going to exist. You have to create the data set that AI runs against. So there has to be someone like Brendan who really understands what public safety needs AI to do. Then there has to be someone who creates that data set, and he touched on the part about making sure that the outcome is what you're looking for, so the quality assurance piece as well. So those jobs at least for the foreseeable future, are going to be around.
Yeah, that domain knowledge is what that's called, is someone in that position that understands the data and the structures and how it was created and how it was received and stored and organized. Yeah, like you said, it's not going away anytime soon.
Great, I concur. I definitely think that prompt engineering and data scientists, business analysts are all like job titles and fields of study that people should continue to pursue. To the gentleman in the back, yes, sir.
Yes, good afternoon. The NYPD had not that long ago utilized predictive AI to analyze patterns and look at high crime areas to actually substantially reduce crime, at least statistically speaking. But as we all know, AI does have some bias that is baked in. And you had mentioned wonderfully that oversight, not just within the police force, but also the community. Is that something that would be possibly brought up with, say, the Community Oversight Board or any other places where community can get an understanding of how AI is utilized within the various public safety sector?
So you touched on one of my personal biggest fears with AI or concerns, because when you take a look at who's developing AI, so we have our own AI model that we've developed, but the reality is the people that are developing the technology are not reflective of society. That's where the issue begins. And it's very difficult to find people that are qualified to provide oversight at that level to make sure the algorithm is reflective of the society that it's governing. So that's where I think there is more of an opportunity, more work needs to be done, so I'll tell you what my experience was. I mean, I wanted to get to market quickly. You invest a lot of money in developing this AI technology, and I tried to find people that were more reflective of society. But the reality is I wasn't getting the result I wanted, so I had to pivot. And, now my development team is pretty monolithic, which means that they do not have a good feel for the society. They do come in with preconceived biases, but these guys are above my pay grade, and I've been in the technology for a long time, so I'm not qualified to go in and say, here's where the bias is. So the way that we work around that right now is because we are detecting firearms, we do try to look at different scenarios. So with the way that we build our data set of guns is we have different people carrying guns. So every gun has at least 15 images, so different lighting, different person holding it, different ages, different gender, and that way we're trying to cut out the bias. But then the real danger is when you start to build in tools like what you said in New York, where they're looking at anomalous behavior. And what I mean by that is things that are suspicious for, let's say, white people is not suspicious for black people. Body movements are different. Clothing is different. So at that point where the developer built this in and said, okay, this is a suspicious behavior, notify police, might be normal behavior. So that's where we have to be really careful, which also means that we have to have people that are qualified to go in and take a look at what has been developed and suggest changes.
That's a great question. Did you have something, Sergeant Gill?
I did. I love that question. And one of oversight is important. I think that being transparent about not only the design of the systems as well as its use and implementation control is important. And that to me is more important than anything else, is making sure that any system that we purchase or develop for use within law enforcement in the county is by default going to inherit that transparency coming through our units, right? So if it's something that my shop oversees, that's one of the things that we need to be very clear about. What that transparency looks like obviously is of concern, because we need to ensure that we protect the integrity of our victims and victim survivors from a human trafficking perspective, violent crime victims from that perspective. And to your point, that domain knowledge, what does a mistake look like, right? If the artificial intelligence or the augmented intelligence tool is making a mistake, who is the best person or group to say this is an issue, even if it is a third-party consultant that's external that looks at that. That whole model is, this is all pretty new, but I think transparency in all systems, in all things, as well as that oversight are going to be key indicators of that. Thank you. That's a good question.
Yes, it was a great question, and it's a good segue into this next question that I have for you both. What are the key challenges and concerns associated with the deployment of AI in public safety, particularly with regards to privacy, bias, and potential misuses?
Yeah, no, that's almost along the exact same lines I was just saying, and I just also want to preface that although I represent the police department here, there are other public safety entities that share similar concerns and similar challenges. I see Paul back there from the fire department. The health department has some concerns, Department of Corrections. So that entire sphere really is all just, we're all looking at each other like, okay, what are we going to do? How is this going to go? How do we answer some of these very basic questions while also still allowing these types of tools to be implemented in a safe and secure way? I think the protection of not only criminal justice information systems or CJIS data, HIPAA data is going to be unbelievably vital with coupled that transparency, making sure that we all know when we are using a tool for ABC, that we disclose, hey, we're using this type of a tool to perform this type of a task, and this is the point of contact for if you have further questions, you can reach out to this person that could answer various things. Yeah.
So I think another one is the efficacy of the data or the results. So, of course, law enforcement is very focused on chain of custody to support investigations. Same thing. So technologies like ShotSpotter and Evolve are notifying that we believe that a crime has occurred or is occurring, and that's used as evidence. But that also means that it needs to be accurate. So if ShotSpotter is saying we heard 5 gunshots and we believe that it's a 9mm, that's what it should be. Same thing with any AI technology. I mean, if it's saying that this is what has occurred, you need to be able to trust the results. So that's also a big concern, that what comes out of AI is what's actually happening.
And yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, and I think the mathematical concept of predictive policing, which is calculus-based, is different than augmented or artificial intelligence predictive event-based. I will say that we in the county use our analysts to analyze incident-based data, but we don't connect any of those futuristic models to records report-related data, because that's where you would house the victim information, victim biographics, demographics of suspects and arrestees. We don't actually tap into that electronically, automatically. We have analysts that perform those types of functions. But again, to the point of that data bias, ensuring that the data is not misrepresented throughout any sort of demographic or socioeconomic benchmark is going to be, the next phase of if we're going to deploy this, how are we going to deploy it, and then in what spheres? Are we going to simply look at administrative tasks, or are we going to apply it to actionable intelligence gathering or data-driven strategies? I think that's the million-dollar question moving forward.
Yeah, and to that point, I think it needs to be a part of a holistic solution. AI is not the answer, at least not yet.
Sure.
So certainly as you're deploying the solutions, keep in mind that in some cases it will be inaccurate, but that's where someone comes in and really tweaks the model so that it's more effective in the future.
So in the same vein of potential misuse, but on the other end of the spectrum, in terms of like consumers using generative AI, can we touch a moment on how generative AI can be used to potentially commit crimes? There was a recent article or a recent news headline out of Baltimore County. And how is public safety, like county officials, public services looking to address that, or having that on, being aware of that needs to be on their radar? What would you say with that?
Yeah, so that's something that is not going to go away. How can some of these AI tools be used nefariously? I think there was a question earlier, sir, you had asked about the cyber realm, right? Sorry for calling you out like that, but it's appropriate. It's a really good question. as well as using generative AI to create illicit material, whether that be images or videos, or using AI tools to frame false narratives, to provide false evidence, clone voice, to impersonate someone, fraud, extortion, all of these things. You've heard a lot of them earlier today. I will say that we are a bit lucky in this county and in this state. Maryland is very unique in the fact that Maryland has an accredited program, the first of its kind in the United States, that actually trains public safety officials in these types of items, the uses of AI and its negative consequence and how it can be used in crimes. As someone that was involved in the Baltimore matter, that investigation, we are still learning so much from exactly what happened and how it was allowed to happen. So we're taking an aggressive stance from a public safety perspective in this county to educate and to train, and I think that's kind of the first bit, is making sure that we all truly understand the good and the bad. Whenever I teach these things, I always like to give the analogy of it's neither good nor bad. AI tool is an AI tool. Its use determines goodness, and its use determines badness. So that the first thing is training, education. And the second thing is ensuring that any sort of tool that is deployed is evaluated and has an oversight system that's transparent, not only to the employees that's using the tool, to the decision makers that are involved in the procurement and deployment process, but also obviously the taxpayers and the community that we all serve, because it's, like you were saying, it's not us versus. It is all of us coming together to say this is the next phase technologically, just like cell phones, just like body cameras, just like recordings. We just all have to make sure we all understand what those risks are, and education and public outreach are the number one ways to ensure that transparency is in place.
So I want to drill down into one of the topics that Brendan touched on, and that's what happens with cyber. So Shelby, I'm pretty sure you remember with the end user security awareness training, it was easy to detect an email that was probably fraudulent because of typos and misspellings. That almost never happens anymore because of large language models and generative AI. So someone who has English as a second language who is in another country can write an email that sounds like it came from America. And I'll tell you from personal experience, I almost got caught by a major cyber incident, that I had to end up reporting to the FBI. So, one of the other company that we have does IT and cyber managed services. So we got an order in from Boston Scientific, a big order. This was an order for about $220,000. For a company my size, that moves the needle significantly. So I'm anxious. I moved forward with the order, and it got fulfilled, and it was being shipped until the fulfillment reached out and said, something looks a little bit off. And what was off is that there was something about that email address that was just slightly different. And sure enough, it was a fraudulent order. But they had come up with a PO. They had done all kinds of things. It looked legitimate. Everything looked right except that little thing in the email address. And normally, if I had enough time, I probably would have caught it, but I'm doing a million things a day. So it's just an example of how people that consider themselves to be sophisticated can be caught because of what AI is doing. And they're getting better and better at it. So I would encourage people to slow down based on my personal experience and to really pay attention, because generative AI is making cyber attacks much more effective.
That's a great point. So we have a question in the audience. Yes, ma'am.
Hi there. I guess this is more of a question about culture with the employees and also the community members, because we know AI is going to make mistakes, and sometimes it does have bias, and we can't correct those mistakes sometimes until they happen. So how are you guys able to pivot or get your organization to be willing to pivot when sometimes such grave mistakes are made, without them saying, let's just throw it out, I don't trust it anymore?
So one of the big things for me, and this comes from my time as CIO, I would say up front, as we implemented something, we're going to get into production. It's not going to be perfect when it gets there, but over time we're going to make it a lot better. But I would also say that when something occurs, here's what we're going to do to react and fix it quickly. So similar approach here. So don't put it out there and say this is going to solve all of your problems. So I'll tell you, part of our agreement when we roll out the technology is to say, we're not saying this is going to be 100% accurate. You have to put that indemnity in there to say that, okay, this is a tool that should be a part of a larger suite, but we're constantly striving to get better. And of course, our goal is 100%, but the reality is that's almost never going to happen because it's next to impossible to account for all scenarios. So you have to do a great job of communicating that and not oversell what AI is able to do. That's the biggest thing.
Yeah, and to jump on that, I think a very unbelievably valid points that I completely concur with. And I'll give you a bit of a simile. Would you want an AI tool to fly your airplane with your family across the country, or would you be okay with an AI tool scanning your luggage and that's all it does, right? So when we are looking at how to mitigate those risks, because we know AI has mistakes, they all do. All technology has failure points. Anything that you can plug in is bound to break at some point because it may take a year or 20, 30, 100 years, but technology is not perfect. Nothing is. Neither are humans. We're all flawed. What is the risk in what you deploy that makes that important? So we would never want to deploy a solution, and we would not deploy a solution that would have a direct impact on human life, but we are very comfortable saying we want to explore deploying a solution that may make fiscal management tracking better, or document routing, or transcription services, where if a mistake is made, you're not, and a mistake's gonna happen, it's not gonna have a negative systemic impact on a community at whole. It may get a spreadsheet wrong. It may send your luggage to Dallas, but you actually went to Fort Worth, right? Okay, cool, human has to go fix it. So it's what are you deploying? What area are you deploying it in, and making sure that everybody is unbelievably transparent in the limitations and knowing the flaws up front. And managing those kind of expectations is important. Yep. Does that? Yeah.
And if I may add to that, so when I train people on how to use like generative AI tools like ChatGPT for text generation, as well as like image creation. So the human is always the domain expert. So the AI is an assistive tool, so you always have to verify what it's done. Yeah. You can't just accept the output and put it in an email and hit send. That has the potential to make you look really bad, whether you're the supervisor or the employee. So you want to, read through it, make sure it's factually accurate, but you'll only know that if you're the domain expert. So it's an assistive tool. So like with image creation, I call it, the eye may be tangled. It may...
or the fingers.
Yeah, it can have really bad fingers. It's notoriously bad with fingers. It's getting better with text, but it's notoriously bad with like fingers and toes, and sometimes it can give you extra arms. So as a domain expert, as an image editor, you should have those Photoshop skills to be able to fix it, or know enough about, generative AI to tweak it in the prompt or something like that. So it's never going to take away that human element. It's just there to assist. So I think as leaders and even, the staff level people, you need to go into it knowing that it's just an assistive tool for me. It's not to replace me at all. Are there any other questions at the moment? Yes, sir.
Yes, hello. This is Javion Walker, State's Attorney's Office, Senior Digital Evidence. My question is, what is the main challenges with implementing AI into cybersecurity framework? That was my main question.
Yeah, so it's already, there's no shortage of cybersecurity tools and risk management frameworks that are using it. I would say the real challenge is determining which of them are doing what you want them to do, because it's such a crowded market. I think last time I checked, it was like 40,000 different cybersecurity tools, and I would guess that of that 40,000, maybe half of them are saying they're AI, but that doesn't mean that they're any good, so there's so much on the market right now. So really understanding what's going to get your mission accomplished for the lowest cost. That's the biggest challenge because everyone is saying they're AI right now when in actuality there's not that much. And certainly not that much that's new. And certainly if it's new, it's not worth what you're paying for it. I mean, you know, that from my experience, and I'm pretty sure, you know, just about everyone at OIT can tell you, I mean, the costs are ridiculous. I mean, what the county paid for Siebel. I mean, I was a part of that, but, you know, once again, you know, you really have to have some sort of way of saying that, okay, this is what I'm looking for. These are the tools that will fit it, and a way for you to measure whether or not you got that, a cost-benefit analysis. So when you're taking a look at cybersecurity tools, the biggest thing is to, you know, you lead with the requirements. Don't let someone come in and sell you what they think you're looking for, you know, and you have to be very clear on that up front and say, here's the way that I'm going to measure not just you, but these other platforms that I'm taking a look at as well. Because, like I said, everyone's going to oversell what they're capable of doing, and very few are actually going to deliver.
Yeah, and to echo that, your RFP process would need to be very specific on things like, are you looking at a tool that does include, you know, attack vectors or defense vectors? Are you looking at exploiting vulnerabilities that are known in open source? Are you talking about connecting into other systems where vulnerabilities can be listed and or repeated? So a lot of those processes are challenges. And then, you know, to your point, just because something says it's AI, it doesn't mean it's AI, right? So I can use calculus to do predictive policing models, and it has nothing to do with machine learning. It has nothing to do with artificial intelligence, and it's a system that we've, you know, used from an incident-based data for the last 15 years, because humans do it, and then calculus gives us probabilities. But the minute I slap AI onto it, and everybody's like, oh, I need that tool. Cool, it's not actually AI, I just rebranded it, but now I can upsell it, you know, upcharge and sell it to you, and you're going to buy it. So being specific on that RFP is probably the first challenge. Is it, you know, like I said, attack or defense? And then what are you looking for in between all of it? To, you know, echo your points of sometimes things just have a new label on it, but it's not actually what everybody thinks it is.
Yeah, I would say in terms of cybersecurity, especially for organizations like yours, the biggest opportunities would be around deep learning, you know, because you are taking a look at different data sets. And the challenge with taking a look at different types of data is the format doesn't necessarily map one-to-one. And the good way to be able to do that is with neural networks, you know, which function a lot like our brains do. I mean, our brains make weird associations between data points, and neural networks and deep learning can do that. So if you can find a cybersecurity tool that can pull in those different types of data, different data points, and make associations that we would have trouble making otherwise, that's probably something worth taking a look at.
That was a great question. Thank you. To the gentleman in the back.
Oh, Paul's loud.
Well, for the recording.
Okay, no problem. I don't like my voice on mics, but we're going to try this anyway. So I'm from the fire department, Paul Brown. The question I have is, being in this consortium and hearing everything about AI, the one thing that I really haven't heard is some type of standardization, right? We have the OSI models, we have all these concepts, we have all these different theories, but it seems like this concept of AI, it's so wide and broad that, you know, you have this person saying their opinion on it, this person saying their opinion on it, but there's no standard. Can you guys maybe speak on that in terms of, you know, your expertise and what you've developed? I know up there, Catherine at one point earlier had mentioned they have 7 patterns, and so their company worked on 7 patterns and how they systematically went about going through AI as well, what is your need? What is this? What is that? I'm just trying to get a better understanding of that as I relate it to fire and what we're going to be using AI for in the future.
Yeah, I think part of the problem is that people have a problem defining what AI is. To Brendan's point before, I mean, people are saying, hey, this is AI, when it's really not. So first of all, we have to understand what AI is, define it, and say, okay, these are the things that we're going to measure, and then you can put a framework around it once you agree on that. A good example of where people are struggling to really get a framework in place or a way to govern is with the government standards, CMMC. They've been trying to roll that out for years. And part of the reason they're having trouble rolling it out is because what they're measuring is evolving. They're not really agreeing on what they're measuring, how many standards they're going to measure against. Same thing with AI. So what is it that we're talking about? I mean, are we talking about the data itself? What's going to be going in? Are we talking about what's going to be coming out? I mean, are we talking about some other sort of AI that's I talked about deep learning, I mean, governing that. So it's just so broad. I mean, we have to agree on what it is before we can govern it.
And to echo that, I think really there's two categories there. It's construction and its use. And those two drive terms, right? So there are some standards like large language models. That's a standard term. We know how it's constructed and we know what it's used for. It's the same with the GPT, or Generative Pre-trained Transformer. I know it's a ridiculous acronym, but it's a very specific type of AI tool that's constructed in a specific way that's used for a specific purpose. And I think personally, the government here and the Prince George's County Police is going to have a hard time navigating what those terms should be, because we didn't build them, and that's not our practice. And then how do we actually determine its use? So a lot of times in our realms, we're kind of relying on the private sector to say, hey, this is what we did, this is what it's supposed to do, and this is what we use it for. And then we're like, oh, okay, let me combine that term with this term, and now I have an ideology for, mechanism to do a thing with it. Even legislatively, like there are no real laws in Maryland that govern the use of an AI outside of inappropriate images of minors, right? So that law that's brand new, that just happened. So a lot of this is still in its infancy. There's a lot of headway being made here for that.
If I may add, in the opening conference panel, Jean and Dwayne were talking about a task force that is going to be stood up. I think by the end of the month, they're going to be developing a charter to talk about some of that standardization and framework and governance that needs to be put into place as it pertains to AI. So I think it's coming soon. Did I see a question over here? No? Okay. Did anybody else have a question? Okay, so we have about a little less than 10 minutes. I wanted to circle back on something that came up in the conversation a while back and ask this question. What strategies are being implemented to address biases and ethical considerations with AI algorithms used for predictive policing or risk assessment?
Fascinating question. The very short, super easy answer is we won't connect it into systems at the county level where that is a high risk. For example, we're not going to use an AI tool and say, here, let's go AI and analyze all the 911 calls for service in the past 50 years and try to give me a prediction of where they're going to be in the next 30, and we're going to randomly smatter resources to cover that area in a blanket fashion. One, that risk model is so high, it's not even funny. We are unbelievably uncomfortable with that, and we're also very unbelievably uncomfortable with outside vendors that say, hey, if you give me all your 911 data, I can build something to tailor it to make your jobs more effective. Thank you, no, we're good. But at the end of the day, we all know the push moving forward is to embrace technology to assist our efforts. And law enforcement, public safety, healthcare, fire EMS, we've always been very slow to adopt things, and I think that's, again, one of the ways that we mitigate our risk is we don't want to be the first ones to dive into something before we really understand what it's doing and how it's doing it. I say this with a couple of you looking at me like, yeah, well, Brendan, I remember some conversations. You were sitting across the table from me a couple of years ago, and you said, let's do this first. I get that. There's a bit of a double-edged sword. But the minute we start talking about learning, whether it's machine, whether it's augmented, whether it's artificial, whether it's synthetic, we have a seat. And we know that there are limitations and bias in the human mind just as much as there is in an electronic one. So we want to make sure that we evaluate it at nauseum prior to us actually applying anything that's learned to a real-world scenario that could have disparaging effects on the community. That's literally the opposite of what AI is designed to do.
So I think we could be at the beginning of an inflection point, or at least where there's an opportunity to approach things differently. IT evolved to move away from custom software development to do more COTS or off-the-shelf software. But I think with AI, there's an opportunity, and one way that you could eliminate bias and minimize the impact on communities is to have a public-private partnership, which is something that happens with construction. With construction, you get public dollars, and someone comes in from the outside and they built this thing, and of course the government is the one who ultimately has oversight. There's an opportunity for something like that here, where, to Brendan's point, there's no way they're going to give the data, but if you have the private sector coming in to work in tandem with Brandon, so Brandon has oversight over what's happening, what's being built into that data, and oh, by the way, the people that are going to be impacted by these tools, bring them in to work on it. So at this point, it's a career pipeline opportunity too. So I mean, some of the people that are walking around that are very interested in IT, give them internships, give them apprenticeships to learn how to work in AI and data analytics. So there's an opportunity here. I think we just have to be a little more creative in terms of how we approach it.
Yeah, to that point, my unit, my shop does do internships. We love our interns. We love our undergrad students. Back to that, the standards, I think, are going to be very important. Who's building it? We follow, in my shop at least, in my unit, we follow the Danish police model, where they try to do as much as possible internally, so that way their risks are mitigated, because you need data to make these things work, and we won't sell our data. We won't give away our data. So cool, if we won't sell the data and give away the data in order to build these things or evaluate these things or even test these things, the only people that have access are internal. So how do we get that workforce? How do we, not exploit, but how do we allow ourselves the benefits of that teacher-student partnership formally to make it equitable? I think that's very important.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, again. I had a question that's very much similar to what you were speaking on about the AI that we currently do use in the county. Who built it? As we've talked about before, needing like a domain expert. Yeah. Would it be a better idea for our agencies to train someone from the inside rather than get someone outside, so that we can tailor it to our needs?
So, good question and very valid points. Let me say it by prefacing it. We did not build any sort of AI tool. The police department didn't build one. We don't own one. There's no overarching system that just has carte blanche access to stuff. That's not something that exists. What we do have, however, are what's called weak AI assistants. Like you heard a few earlier talk about complex tools that are embedded in applications that we already own, that we've owned for years. And they serve various purposes, like Grammarly or spell check, right? All of those types of tools exist at the enterprise level. And then to your point, who oversees those, who kind of, domain stuff. Hi, my name's Brendan. I work for the Information Technology Division of the Prince George's County Police Department, right? So that's any of those types of systems, or their acquisition, or their deployment, or their methodologies within law enforcement, or data within human trafficking, all fall within kind of the purview of what I do. But it's not just me, right? We do have partnerships. We do have executive reviews. We do look at everything in depth. I read a lot of non-disclosure statements and privacy policy and terms of use statements, and those documents, those contracts are very heavily vetted to ensure that when we're going to buy something, we're going to implement it, we know exactly what it's supposed to do, and we know exactly what its limits are.
Yeah, so I am a big fan of, the government making sure that someone internally knows the tool and can maintain it long term. But one of the most important things is you also have to make sure that the people that are working in the tool are being trained and staying up to date on the latest developments. Because oftentimes what happens is you are only thinking about implementing this tool and it's going to cost $100 million to put this system in place and we're done. There are costs every year, and that really has to be accounted for. So, just making sure the workforce is staying up to date and getting out of government and into industry to really learn what the latest developments and possibilities are. So that has to be a part of the equation as well.
Yeah, we don't have the resources like, the private sector does to drive innovation into this depth. We don't. And anyone that says, the government does, I don't really know. But the partnerships are where it's so unbelievably important because we are trying to keep up with what's currently a need, but we can't make the need. But the private sector can make the need, but sometimes they don't quite know what the need is. So it's that symbiosis when it's beneficial, when it's ethical and transparent is unbelievably important.
Well, I would like to thank you both. This has been very informative for me. We are at our time, unfortunately. That went by quick, didn't it?
It did. Yeah.
There was a lot of great questions.
Yeah, thank you for the questions.
A lot of great dialogue. We appreciate all of your questions. Thank you to Sergeant Gill and Mr. Wright for being here today. And that concludes this panel discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you.